Let's bring in our guest today who's going to do his best to keep us in our legal lanes on the issue of Toronto police corruption. And again, you know him. This is Ian Runkle, Runkle of the Bailey, firearms rights activist and fully fledged lawyer in his own right. So you'll be able to give us some legal analysis of the crazy story out of Toronto.
This one's insane.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of watched it all unfold just before we went on air, and then we reacted to it as we went on air. But Ian, give us a breakdown of what happened in Toronto yesterday.
So they've arrested apparently 7 Toronto police officers and 30 total people, it sounds like, from some reports. And the allegations are crazy. They're abusive police systems to get information, some of which it's alleged was then fed to hitmen to facilitate drive-bys and assassination attempts. Apparently this was connected to a targeting of a peace officer as well.
Yeah.
There's suggestions that officers were taking bribes to help defeat law enforcement for the tow truck industry as well as illegal dispensaries. So there's an allegation that one officer was trafficking in cocaine, possession of prohibited weapons, all sorts of things. It's basically, hey, we found a whole bunch of organized crime and it's us. We're doing the organized crime, which, is just absolutely crazy when you get right down to it, because, people sort of, all the time, people, on the firearm field say, well, you don't need a firearm, just call the police. And it's like, well, what if the police actually were the ones who sent the hitmen to your house?
Right. What an excellent point. It's true that one peace officer, I think is a corrections officer.
Yep.
The gangs, which includes the police in this case, allegedly, to his house 3 times in an assassination attempt in 36 hours.
Yeah. And if that person's out there, I hope they're applying for a carry permit, because the law does actually have provisions for carry permits. And quite frankly, I think that officer has the best argument for one that anyone has ever had, because it's like, oh, right, gangs have targeted this person 3 times. And one of the parts of the test that they put in is, well, that police protection is not sufficient under the circumstances. Well, if he gets any more police protection, they're likely to succeed. I mean, the police protection is the problem.
That's a great point, Ian. And I'll tell you, there's a litany of charges. They're all serious. But the worst one, as Sheila alluded to, was conspiracy to commit murder. And this was of an officer at a detention center. So that just rattles me to the core. I hope he does apply and gets that carry permit. But what I want to get to, Ian, you probably watched the presser yesterday, or at least you saw excerpts of it. In terms of that being a touchdown or fumble for law enforcement, where do you weigh in? And I should preface this by saying Lincoln Jay and I did go up to York Regional Police headquarters in Aurora, Ontario. And this was shocking because I've never had a problem with York Regional Police. We were not only not allowed into the presser, and I found out afterwards it was due to safety reasons, but we were told to leave the outdoor premises or face trespassing, which is really curious because I thought this was about restoring trust and doing a PR event and showing that the cops are our friends, not our enemies. But it was staggering. And in terms of this being a safety issue, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, it looked like Chief Demkew and Chief McSween were wearing bulletproof vests.
Right.
And you know what? Let's talk about that. There's one of 2 reasons they were not wearing their traditional ceremonial outfits as police chiefs. One was to send the message that we're serious. We got our work gear on. We're going to get to the bottom of this, not leave a single stone unturned. I think they said that phrase 17 times. Can't see any stones. We're under like 4 feet of snow. Or could it be that the height of paranoia is so high that they don't know who's who in the zoo? They don't know if there's somebody in there that might take a pot shot at them. So let's talk about their apparel yesterday. Ian, your thoughts?
I suspect it's just the thing of we want to come out looking like we're, we're badasses and so forth. But I mean, we should always celebrate when they do rout out corruption, because if all they get is grief over it, maybe they don't do it as thoroughly. But the other question is just how long has this been going on? Because this is not the first major corruption issue. Right. They had the senior case not that long ago. And the senior case just seems to illustrate that they're, I can say I've had a number of current and former police officers in the area reach out to say, because I put out a video on this and they said, you don't know how deep it goes. It is way worse than it's being reported. So, I mean, if I was one of the people on this, task force, I'd certainly be taking safety precautions. Like, this is the sort of time where I'd be like, hey, the rest of the family, maybe you'd like to stay somewhere else for a little bit because, they seem to like drive-bys, this kind of thing, because all of this is very concerning. And when you've got people who are willing to take a shot at a corrections officer, I mean, I don't know because none of the details have been reported, but it seems likely that somebody was arrested and that corrections officer probably was, they decided they didn't like him for whatever reason, and then decided to target him. It might be something like, we want you to traffic stuff into the jail, and the guy says no. Or it might be something like, he goes in and somebody who thinks that they deserve respect didn't feel that he was giving them the respect they were owed, whatever it is, but they decided to target this guy. Well, if they're willing to target a corrections officer, do you think they're not willing to target, say, a detective?
Right.
For sure. I imagine there's a lot of officers right now who are feeling a little nervous.
And Ian, think of how perverse this is, that what you're alluding to, having some of those officers go into the witness protection program, not from the bad guys, but from members of law enforcement who are now rotten.
From what I understand, one of these officers was arrested on duty. Like he was picked up while he was on duty. And the Toronto police know that they have a public trust problem. And I think this doesn't make it any better, obviously. So this is an article from Global News, just a follow-up on what happened yesterday. They say a study completed by the Toronto Police Services Board last year found public trust in the force was, quote, strained. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. With many concerned about misconduct and the uneven application of standards. From the public, we heard similar concerns about mistrust, systemic bias, and a lack of visible accountability, which goes to David's point earlier. And they say repeated incidents of misconduct and social media narratives reinforce skepticism, especially among youth and newcomer communities. But I mean, this doesn't help anybody. And then, when we have the police investigating themselves here, that I don't think serves to fix the problem here. I mean, should an outside agency be doing the investigation here, Ian?
If nothing else, I think we need somebody else to check their homework, right? Just even if they are the best people to investigate, there should be somebody else. We need some accountability. And the Canadian system is one of the least accountable, least open systems. I sometimes cover U.S. cases, and U.S. cases provide a wealth of information. The public can look at it, and sometimes the public looks at it and goes, this case stinks. And sometimes the public looks at it and goes, this is excellent investigation. But the public actually gets to look in, and that transparency and accountability is something that our system really doesn't have. The police choose how much information they want to release, and the police seem to release more information when it's not an officer charged and less information when it is. But this is a concern. And one of the things I say of a fair bit is that good police officers deserve to
Yes.
work with good police officers.
Absolutely.
I have no, I'm not an anti-police person, but I'm an
Neither.
anti-police corruption person. And the best thing we can do for the good officers out there, the ones who are, upholding all of these things, is to protect them from bad officers and corruption that might otherwise drive them out. And when I said some police officers right now are going to be walking, with one eye over their shoulder, it's going to be the good police officers
Yeah.
who have reason to be afraid, because the ones who are corrupt, well, they're just, they know they're okay.
Right.
It's like,
the gangs
well, I'm
have
fine.
them.
But Ian, can I ask you about the procedure itself in terms of the investigation? I thought the very best question asked at that presser that we were, of course, banned from attending was from our friend Joe Warmington of the Toronto Sun. And he basically put York Regional Police Chief Jim McSween on the hot seat by saying, you've uncovered all this corruption, all this serious crime occurring by Toronto Police Service officers, and you phone the chief of the Toronto Police Service, Myron Demkew. A, it's almost like tipping him off. B, doesn't this now put you in a conflict of interest? Aren't you compromising the investigation? Where do you weigh in on that?
I mean, it's really difficult. Who do you report these things to? Which officers can be trusted to be involved in an investigation and which can't? Because with some of the past corruption issues, one of the issues that came up with the senior case is they were concerned that they thought he was pulling information out of the police databases to tip off subjects of the investigation. So if you've got that concern, the problem is that the police have access to tremendous amounts of information, both on active investigations as well as on members of the public. And so how do you firewall it if it's all happening internally? How do you make sure that this is something where, the corrupt officers can't get a tip off by, running their own name, for instance, or having another officer run their name or their plate or whatever else? So, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have a separate police force whose job it is to investigate the first police.
Yeah.
But I don't think that anyone's going to put the money ahead for that. And also, just there's practical realities that would make that difficult. But it's really concerning. And people in Toronto, if you're an honest tow truck driver, it's a really bad situation if you're looking at it going, not only is there organized crime moving in heavily on this industry, but even the police who are supposed to protect us are in on it. How do we have any confidence? If I was a witness to an organized crime, something they were up to, it's like, well, if we can't trust the police, do I want to report this? All of this suppresses any sort of law enforcement interests. So they need to clean house in a big way.
Ian, I think being a tow truck driver in the greater Toronto area, it might be the most dangerous job in the world. I'd rather be fishing for Alaskan king crab. But Sheila, what I found appalling about yesterday's press conference, it was one police service congratulating another endlessly. And Chief Demkew of the Toronto Police Service, he never made any mea culpas. He never said the S word, sorry. He never said the phrase, the buck stops here.
Sure.
It was deflection and whatnot. And I want to go back to what you recited, Sheila, in the Global News article about, the public losing trust in the force. And one of the reasons was the uneven application of standards. Could that mean what we've seen for more than 2 years now in Toronto? We have had the pro-Hamas types chanting for genocide, displaying swastikas, cosplaying as terrorists. Nothing happens to them, but peaceful counter-demonstrators are arrested and incarcerated. Members of the independent media are arrested for trespassing. being on a public sidewalk and chronicling this hatred. And I'm sorry, I shouldn't say nothing happens to the Hamas people. On a cold day like this, the Toronto Police Service has a tendency to reinvent themselves as Uber Eats drivers and bring coffee and donuts to the haters. So Sheila, is that what this means, the uneven application of standards? In other words, the blatant double standards we've seen in the city for more than 2 years now?
David, is this a trick question? Like, obviously that's it. Like, obviously. Why are you asking me? The public sees that, and it does make them distrust the police. The police become people that they feel that they can't go to for help, that won't defend their rights as equally as they would the next person. I want to ask Ian, though, before we let him go on this topic, what does legally speaking, what does this mean for past convictions involving some of these officers?
Oh, yes.
Wherein they were witnesses in the case? But do these things get reopened? What happens now?
Well, the police made a statement that I thought was blatantly, bullshit, if I can say it.
Please.
What they said is, oh, well, this doesn't, threaten any past investigations. And of course it threatens past investigations. Every defense lawyer in the area is going to be pulling current and past files looking for the names of these officers. Yeah. And anybody, like, if you're in custody right now, this is there's people who will be bringing appeals saying, well, I was convicted on the testimony of this guy, and now we know he's a member of organized crime. So that would have been highly relevant to my trial, and
right.
There may well be trials reopened. There may well be people who are in custody now. And, people are going to be like, oh, criminals are going free. Well, maybe, because it's actually possible some of these people may be actually innocent because they were convicted on the word of somebody who,
a gangster?
is a liar, who is a, if so, we may see massive shock waves with people going and having their cases reopened and re-examined. Certainly, if I was in the Crown's office and I had a case right now that hinged on one of these people, there'd be no way to actually proceed with it, because how do you, you're going to bring in your police witness and he's going to be in
orange,
in prison orange. It's like Officer so-and-so, and
right.
Like, wait,
so what you're saying, Ian, if you're one of those defense lawyers and you come across a case where one of those corrupt cops was giving evidence, I can only think of that community chess card in Monopoly, get out of jail free.
Grounds for appeal, for sure.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always the government's burden to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that means that they have to have good evidence to do so. You can't have good evidence from a bad cop. It's, especially not when the allegations are this spectacular. So, officer, you found the cocaine in my client's glove box. Isn't it true you're currently facing charges for trafficking cocaine?
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it true you're currently facing charges for conspiracy to commit murder? Like, I would run that trial in front of a jury any day of the week, because the jury's going to sit there and go, oh, we're not going to convict on this. Where did the cocaine come from? Well, maybe it's the guy, or maybe it's the officer.
Right.
Maybe. And if you went in and suggested that this wasn't actually a real prosecution, but that this was the government, taking out a competitor, or, or the sort of the organized crime taking out a competitor or something like that, I mean, it becomes really plausible. A story that would have been completely lunatic, fanciful, like this officer is framing this guy on behalf of organized crime, suddenly becomes like, no, that could happen.
Right.
And Ian, that that compounds the tragedy in terms of public safety, I think, because it's true. You can frame a guilty man. We saw that with the O.J. Simpson trial of yesterday. But, I want to get your thoughts on how do we fix this? Because my personal opinion, well, he won't step down. Demke likes that $400,000 plus salary plus.
Somebody wants to be the next Bill Blair.
Exactly. But
we could do without
if you were the mayor, if you were the mayor, if you were running the Toronto Police Services Board, which unfortunately is increasingly having closed door meetings where the public and the media are banned. Ooh, nothing fishy about that. But does it begin with the head of the snake getting rid of Chief Demke, not just for this, but for so many other issues under his watch, such as Toronto having a record crime wave?
There comes a point where if you've got too much corruption in a police force, you may be unable to deal with it without sort of clearing house.
Yep.
And the problem that happens is if you've got 10 corrupt officers on a force, they can push out in a like the officers who don't want to be corrupt. And so that corruption can sort of steamroll where you see everybody who comes in is like, well, if you're not on board, you're going to be pushed out. And so long as you've got that critical mass of people who are hard to find, but when you start getting case after case like this, it means you've got that critical mass, and it means it's going to be hard to just sort of excise a tumor. It might be that the entire patient is sick. And so this might be one of those circumstances where it's like, we need to start bringing in, almost everybody from outside. We need to do a massive hiring and turnover blitz. The problem is that these things are very difficult to do. You've got police unions and so forth that will make it very challenging to do that sort of thing. So I don't see a solution happening anytime soon. As much as I have ideas for how it could work in practice, there's all these barriers that stand between it. But I think that there needs to be, when you've got a police force that has corruption issues on this scale, I don't see how you can sort of do a surgical approach, because you can never be certain you've got it all, right? It's always going to be a case of, and so, my prediction at this point is within the next 10 years, we see another big bust like this because,
this stuff metastasizes.